This is Decision 2020 Battleground, PA, a special report from NBC10 and Telemundo 62.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for this special election coverage. There's a lot going on right now. We want to keep you updated, and that's why we're here. I'm Tracy Davidson.
And I'm Vince Latanzio. Right now, we're continuing to follow the breaking news out of the 2020 election, which is that former Vice President Joe Biden has taken the lead in Pennsylvania. We have the latest details about the vote count underway right now and the state of the presidential race. Let's take a look at those numbers.
You can see there 49.4%, 49.3%, with 95% of the precincts reporting in. This is what we talk about when we talk about being so close, and there's so many variables to talk about. But if Joe Biden were to win the 20 electoral votes in Pennsylvania, that would give him enough votes to win the election.
And let's take a look at the latest update from the nationwide electoral map. Joe Biden is still in the lead with 253 electoral votes to President Trump's 214. The Democratic former vice president is now just 17 votes away from clinching a victory and the White House. Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes, just so you know. And we know that Joe Biden is going to speak tonight in prime time. That's what NBC News is reporting right now.
And it's interesting when we look at that map. Well, we'll now take a look at the live demonstrations that are outside the Pennsylvania Convention Center. This is a growing crowd. Yesterday, we saw a strong and loud crowd, but peaceful.
Lots of dancing out there, Tracy.
A lot of dancing out there, you're right. Well, at least on the one side, both sides are represented here. Many Trump supporters here want the counting to stop. They support the president's unsubstantiated claims that there has been fraud. The president tweeting a few hours ago, Philadelphia has got a rotten history on election integrity, and a lot of the Trump supporters there believe that. There are Biden supporters. Those are the ones who have been dancing. In fact, I think they even have a DJ there.
Yeah.
And they've been chanting, count every vote. There's been dancing. There's a prayer circle earlier. There is a police presence there, but Vince, as you know, ever since the crowd has started to grow on both sides, it's been very peaceful.
Yeah, you know what? I even got a text message yesterday and a few today from organizers looking to get more people out there as the vote counting continues and to show that democracy is at work and to protect the vote counting. And a short while ago, Philadelphia leaders held a briefing about the vote count in Philadelphia inside the Pennsylvania Convention Center, which is right there. Let's hear what they had to say, and then we're going to break it down for you on the other side.
The eyes of the nation and the world were here in Philadelphia. And I'm proud to say that Philadelphia showed up. Our residents turned out in large numbers. They mailed in ballots amidst unprecedented conditions during a global pandemic. They stood in line with neighbors to cast their vote in person. And they have exhibited tremendous patience as they continue to wait for our election staff to count every single vote. I want to personally thank City Commissioners Lisa Deely, Al Schmidt, and Omar Sabir, who oversaw Tuesday's election and continue to lead this impressive counting operation. I thank the staff and hope they all can get some rest soon. I also want to thank the employees of many city departments, which helped stand up and staff this operation. The Office of Innovation and Technology, the Managing Director's Office, Finance Department, our Police Department, Chief Administrative Office, and others have helped support the City Commissioners in preparing for this election for over a year. And there are hundreds of others, including many city employees, who helped on Election Day and by staffing this ballot counting operation for all the world to see. You are all too numerous to name, but please know that you have my thanks and the thanks of the people of this city. And most of all, I thank the people of Philadelphia. Earlier this week, Commissioner Deely and I sent out an open letter to voters, urging patience and calm on Election Day and in the days that followed. You have shown it in spades. We ask that you stay calm and stay above the fray. You did exactly that. What we've seen on the streets outside this convention center was not anger or contention, but music, dancing, and celebration. As we predicted, the voters and residents of Philadelphia ensured that our city shined as an example of how to run an election correctly. So in the days ahead, please remember, this is not about a victory for a single ballot, absentee ballot, and provisional ballot is counted. So while some, including the president, continue to spew baseless claims of fraud, claims for which his team has not produced one iota of evidence, What we have seen here in Philadelphia is democracy, pure and simple. Our founding fathers who conceived this system just a 15-minute walk down the street, I know would be proud. 233 years after the Constitutional Convention, we stand at this convention center and proclaim the system still works, the people have spoken. And God willing, we will have a peaceful transition to power in January. And I'd like to take this moment now to introduce Commissioner Lisa Deely, who's the chair of the Philadelphia City Commissions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank all of you and the public for your continued patience. Our goal has been to produce accurate results as quickly as possible, and we've continued to work toward that end. We've counted a total of 690,360 votes. Of that, 337,609 ballots were cast by mail, and 353,021 were cast at a polling place. This is by far the largest number of mail-in ballots in the city's history. I'm very proud of the work our staff did. They've been working around the clock since Tuesday and before. Here's what you can expect in the upcoming days. At some point this afternoon, we will report another update of mail-in ballot results. I expect it to be 2,000 to 3,000. After that, the remaining ballots generally fall into one of three categories: those that require a review, provisionals, U.S. military overseas ballots. I would estimate there's approximately 40,000 remaining to be counted. We can also tell you that it may take several days to complete the reporting of that. And as you know, election results are not officially certified until 20 days after the election. Thank you again. Thank you to the citizens of Philadelphia. And now I would like to invite Commissioner Omar Sabir to the podium.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the County Board of Election staff. I would like to thank the taxpaying citizens of Philadelphia and across America. I think it's safe to say that democracy has won. Democracy is beautiful. We saw the statue of Octavius Cotto right on City Hall, where he died so that Americans can have access to the democratic process. And as we stand here today in 2020, people still have access to democracy. And it's a beautiful thing, but we still want everyone to exert patience, ignore a lot of the noise that's going on, allow us to complete the counting process.
That was Commissioner Sabir and Commissioner Deely saying that we're going to have another update this afternoon, 2,000 to 3,000, the results of 2,000 to 3,000 more votes counted. Lauren Make, you are getting us through all of this, NBC10's Lauren Make, and the joke is that journalists have a hard time with math, but you've got it down, and that's what it's all about right now, right?
I got some phones and calculators. I'm not doing it all in my head, Tracy.
All right, walk us through, especially for people who, and I know a lot of people, and I'm sure you do too, who have said, look, I needed to step away for a second. So if you've just come back and you're just saying, okay, what's the latest? Tell us where we are, Lauren.
Okay. All right, Tracy. Well, let's start with where we are between Joe Biden and President Trump and the gap between them right now. The gap between them right now is a little over 13,000 votes in Pennsylvania. That amount is twice what it was when I saw you at 11 o'clock this morning. So that gap is getting wider as more mail-in votes come in, because we know that those have tended to favor Joe Biden because the Democrats really pushed for their voters to vote by mail, whereas President Trump's voters a lot of times wanted to vote in person on Election Day. So that's where we are, about 13,000 between them now. So then the question becomes, how many votes are out there to count? Well, let's start with Philadelphia, because that is such a large city. They got more mail-in ballots than anywhere else in the state. And you just heard there from the commissioner. So let's sort of go over what we know about Philadelphia. So we know there's going to be an update this afternoon. At that point, we are going to be getting between another 2,000 to 3,000 results for 2,000 to 3,000 ballots. That's what Commissioner Deely, the chair of the city commissioners, just told us. After that, there will be about 40,000 remaining. They are not just your standard mail-in ballots. I'm told that basically at that point, they will be done with what they can do easily and just feed through the machine. And then these outstanding ballots will fall into a couple of different buckets, if you will. Some of them will need some sort of review. Some of them will be provisional ballots. And some of them will be U.S. military and overseas ballots. And this one, we definitely don't know the number to because they can still arrive up until Tuesday. Now, we asked today how many provisional ballots the city has gotten. We did not get an answer on that at that press conference. However, we're still trying to get an answer on that. And I do have a little more state data that I'm going to give you in just a moment.
Hey, Lauren, before you move on.
Yeah, Tracy.
The need review. So where are the ballots that were postmarked by Election Day, but that came in between Wednesday and today? What bucket do they go in?
We believe that is a separate bucket. But again, that is one of the questions that I sent after that press conference to the city to say, let's make sure that we understand. We don't know how many of those segregated ballots there are. We know that the counties, Philadelphia included, are keeping them separate, but we don't know how many. The commissioner today did not have that number when we asked for it today.
And we should tell her. Go ahead.
Real quick, Lauren. So that those numbers, they're being counted into the overall totals, though, just to be clear.
No, they're not.
They're not.
They're not. So the numbers that you are seeing, the numbers for Joe Biden and President Trump, those numbers do not include those ballots that came in Wednesday, Thursday, and today, and can come in up until 5 o'clock today. Those ballots are separate. What we don't know is, A, how many of them are there, and then B, when will they be counted, and will we get the results? Will we know? Will those be reported out? That's another question that we don't know. As a matter of fact, speaking of questions, let's go.
Wait, one more question.
Well, these are our questions.
Okay, good. Oh, good. Okay, good.
Here are some of the things that we have been following.
Oh, questions.
That we don't know.
Okay.
Provisional ballots.
Yeah.
And actually, I have an answer for you on this that we did not have earlier today. Let me get my notes. So the Secretary of State's office tells me, as of this morning, that there are statewide. Oh, that's not a very good 85,000 provisional ballots that have been reported to them. Now, that only includes 56 counties. Of course, there are 67 in Pennsylvania, and that doesn't necessarily mean those are all the provisional ballots that a county got. Maybe that's just what they knew of at the time or from a certain area. But they have been told about 85,000 provisional ballots.
And provisional ballots, can you explain what they are? Like if you brought your ballot in that day, or you weren't on the voter rolls that day,
or if you didn't bring your ballot in. So really, you cast a provisional ballot if there is some sort of question about whether or not you can vote that day. The one that we've been hearing a lot is the question of whether they want to make sure that you didn't vote some other way. So if you requested a mail-in ballot and then you decided, I'd rather just vote on Election Day. I got this mail-in ballot here, but I'd rather just vote on Election Day. So what the counties wanted you to do was take that ballot with you so that they could spoil that, and then you could vote on the regular machines. But maybe your ballot didn't arrive, maybe you didn't know to take it with you, or you forgot. Then they would say, okay, well, you can vote provisionally. And then the reason these take a long time is because then there are folks who sit at tables and have to go through them and go through the books and make sure that you didn't vote in some other way. So that's why they take longer. But those are some of the reasons why you might cast a provisional ballot. Yeah.
That makes complete sense. Thank you, Lauren.
Sure. So that's what we know about the provisional ballot. So about 85,000 of them. And actually, I got a little more information about that just came in the past 25 minutes or so. So a state appeals court has now told the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania that she needs to instruct the counties to set aside the provisional ballots and then not include them in the larger count, just like we are setting aside the ballots that come in after Election Day.
Right. And we should make the point, Lauren, too, that the reason why this is being done is because they can be disputed. And if they get pushed into the whole lump sum, then the whole total from Pennsylvania can get thrown out. So that's why they need to be segregated, so that if there is a challenge, a court challenge to those, it's only those from that certain bucket that are removed.
Right. And we did not know this up until about 30 minutes ago. So this is brand new that the state appeals court in Pennsylvania has ruled that these have to be separate. If that had not happened, then they may have been included in the larger total. But now the Secretary of State is being told, tell the counties, set them aside. And the issue over this, the reason for this particular challenge that this court was looking at was about whether you could cast a provisional ballot or come in and somehow fix or what they are calling cure an issue with your ballot. So it goes back to that issue we've heard about a number of times. So we now have 2 buckets of segregated ballots that we don't know how many there will be and what the results of them will be and when or if we will find out what the results of them will be.
All right, stay there, Lauren. We'll come right back to you. We're going to move on for a second, but I know we have a lot more questions, and I know you're continuing to get information, so thanks. So we're at 3 days after Election Day. Still no clear answer to who our next president will be. Vote counting, I know you know, is continuing in 6 states. The results are too close to call in at least one state. They've already said there's going to be a recount. Mounting legal challenges, we were talking about those, are sort of creating a cloud over the election. NBC10 national correspondent Tracy Potts is in Wilmington this morning, where Joe Biden's team is on hold, although we are hearing that he will be speaking in prime time tonight.
Well, there have been important, significant developments this morning in the numbers in both Georgia and Pennsylvania as they continue to count ballots. Joe Biden has pulled ahead in both of those states. Pennsylvania only would win him the presidency, but it's important to note we are not there yet. We know in at least one county in Pittsburgh, they will be counting and recounting ballots into the afternoon. In Georgia, it is a razor-thin lead, and there are more ballots. They're now counting on military and overseas ballots to try to distinguish what the final vote count will be there. We're getting reaction from both sides. From the Biden team this morning, campaign aides say they are thrilled, elated, and confident, feeling good, and that was in all caps. And we're also hearing from President Trump's campaign, and in a statement they said that the election is not over, pointing out that many states, including Nevada and Arizona, where there are small leads or smaller leads by Joe Biden, that the president continues to make gains there, that they believe there are irregularities, pointing out that they have court action that is pending that they think may change these numbers, and what they are referring to as Joe Biden's phony claim to the White House. Now, to be clear, he has not made a claim to the White House. He has said that he believes once everything is counted, they will win, and that counting continues today. We are in Wilmington, Delaware, Biden headquarters, awaiting more information about where these numbers are headed. I'm Tracy Potts.
And again, we're waiting for an update on the numbers in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia coming up. But right now, joining us is DNC Vice Chair Assemblyman Michael Blake. Assemblyman, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So we've seen historic turnout in this race. Vice President Biden setting a record for the most votes for any candidate. And I think that everyone predicted that this would be this close, but now we're still in close race in 6 key states. How does what you thought was going to happen compared to this reality that's happening? How do the two compare?
Well, first and foremost, we will soon be saying President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. As has been said, we are absolutely confident that when everything is counted, we will emerge victorious. You know, you look at Pennsylvania, where throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but especially in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh and proper itself, the turnout was tremendous. You know, 90% of vote by mail breaking our way. And so incredible congratulations to the entire staff here for our team. But you think about also Georgia, which we obviously have taken the lead. Yes, there's a recount because it's within that 0.5%.
Yes.
But, you know, the reality is Clayton County, the county that was formerly represented by the late great John Lewis and now represented by Nikema Williams, bringing us over the top. Nevada and Arizona, we're ahead and that lead will grow as well. When we have everything counted, we will go from Vice President Biden to President-elect Biden.
And what is your reaction when you hear the president calling for a stop the vote and calling, especially in Philadelphia, calling out Philadelphia, saying bad things happen in Philadelphia and really challenging the integrity of the results here?
Well, clearly, great things happen in Philadelphia. And if you stop the count, it's not going to stop what's happening, which is Biden and Harris are winning. He'll have plenty of time when he's the former president to be able to watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and all the other great things that emerge out of Philly. And so the nonsense that we're hearing on the other side, unfortunately, instead of trying to heal our country and communities, it's been a continual attack on the Black communities in Philadelphia and Detroit and Milwaukee and Atlanta, the Latino communities in Allentown, Lehigh Valley, and in Arizona and Nevada. But it won't matter because what we're seeing is by the day, by the hour, the continual progress that's happening for our campaigns. And I heard you mentioning this earlier, and it's important. In terms of the separation of the ballots in the case there's a legal threat, and incredible congratulations for the leadership of Josh Shapiro, your AG, preparing and thinking about this as well. That's just in the event that there are challenges and that you can have them separated out to be aware of that. The reality, though, it will not matter. I think it's very clear from all projections, and Senator Casey and others said this earlier, I think we're looking at probably a 90 to 100,000 vote margin for Biden-Harris throughout Pennsylvania when all is said and done.
So you're not worried about Pennsylvania, because I have heard some analysts say it would almost be better if Biden got the electoral votes from 2 other states instead of Pennsylvania, because there are going to be so many challenges here.
I don't understand why anyone would ever say you would want to win someplace else. But I think for the people of Pennsylvania, the birthplace of democracy, given the challenges and pain you've had from the killing of Walter Wallace and all that has happened, the perfect joy and celebration to be the state and the Commonwealth to put Biden-Harris into the White House. That's what's going to be happening. And the reality is you look at any combination of numbers. Arizona, Nevada by themselves combined, Biden victory. Pennsylvania, victory. Adding in Georgia, victory. The reality is it doesn't matter how you slice it. There will be a speech tonight by our next president and our next vice president. And Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you brought this home. Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States.
Assemblyman, you mentioned healing. I think moving forward, even if that indeed does happen, and we hear that speech tonight from the Chase Center in Wilmington, there's still a lot of work to be done, because I feel like we're where we were 4 years ago. There's a very divided country. People feel very passionately on both sides. So how do you move forward?
Well, it's absolutely legitimate that we have to heal. I had the honor of working for President Obama and Vice President Biden on both campaigns in the White House. People remember even in that, while it being a mathematical landslide, we only received 53% of the vote. So there were still divisions in the country. Now, of course, it's been accelerated even more so because of the rhetoric and the actions over the last few years. But what we do understand is regardless of if you voted for him or her or not, they're going to both represent you and saying very clearly, let's move forward for the soul of the nation. Pennsylvania, when we think about the opportunities, whether it be Reverend Lonnie Herndon at Church of Compassion, whether it be Reverend Lou Cortez and others through Esperanza and all the work that's been happening throughout the Commonwealth, whether it be Malik Boyd in Heart of the City, whether it be all different communities that came together to say, how do we move forward as one? We're watching that and we're seeing that. And so it won't be easy. However, Pennsylvania and Philly, anything that you really care about is not easy. And this is about going, as we said this past Sunday, when I had the opportunity to be one of the 2 to introduce our next president. This is about going from pain to promise. And that's what's going to begin tonight. And that will continue over the next few weeks and months ahead. And that will be the vision of the Biden-Harris administration once they take over as our next president and vice president in January.
Assemblyman Michael Blake, thanks so much. Thanks for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so Pennsylvania remains the biggest electoral prize remaining, but the Keystone State isn't the only state still in play. As we've been telling you, race is still too close to call in 3 other key states, and we know of a recount going to have to go on in one state. All right, let's check Arizona. Joe Biden still maintains a slight lead, but the race remains too close to call. We see 93% of the vote in, and the president chipping away at that throughout the day. count is even tighter in the usual Republican stronghold of Georgia. And look at those numbers. At the moment, it's tied. There'll be a recount. Suburban Atlanta mail-in ballots propelling Biden closer. As of right now, the race is too close to call. It'll be up for a recount likely. Moments ago, that state gave us an update.
Right now, Georgia remains too close to call. Out of approximately 5 million votes cast, we'll have a margin of a few thousand. With a margin that small, there will be a recount in Georgia. Interest in our election obviously goes far beyond Georgia's borders. The final tally in Georgia at this point has huge implications for the entire country. The stakes are high and emotions are high on all sides. We will not let those debates distract us from our work. We will get it right, and we'll defend the integrity of our elections.
Okay, so that's Georgia. Now let's take a look at Nevada, where it's Biden with a razor-thin lead. The Trump campaign has filed a lawsuit here calling for the vote count to be stopped. Nevada's 6 electoral votes still up for grabs as votes from the Las Vegas area still need to be counted. So very close there with 92% of the precincts reporting in. Jim?
Hey, Tracy, glad to be with you all here on this remarkable day. Let's talk about some of the reaction out of Washington to what's going on from both sides of the aisle now. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, will start with her. The Democrat claiming victory for Joe Biden today. The speaker said President Trump is working against the well-being of Americans as the administration and Congress work for COVID relief and keeping the government open. Let's listen to her.
Pretty soon the hyphen will be gone from Vice President to President-elect Joe Biden. So officially pleased with the outcome that is imminent, and also personally delighted because of the quality and caliber of leadership that Joe Biden will provide. So, sadly, instead of crushing the virus, it appears that the Trump administration will use its final moments in office and a desperate last step to destroy every possible protection for American health and well-being.
All right, on the other side of the aisle, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell sent out a tweet this morning, and he called for every legal vote to be counted and said all sides must get to observe the process. That's, of course, something that the Trump administration and campaign has been fighting for in court. At an appearance this morning at the Kentucky History Museum in Frankfort, Kentucky, McConnell declined to elaborate on his tweet, but he did comment on the uncertain makeup of the Senate heading into 2020.
I'm not going to answer any hypotheticals about where we go from here. I think this is ultimately going to be decided exactly what I said in my tweet. You're going to have contests, you're going to have court decisions. That's how we settle these kinds of disputes in this country. I'm not going to answer a hypothetical about what it might look like. I'm not certain I'm the majority leader yet. As you all may have noticed, that will be determined in Georgia on January the 6th. And so it makes a big difference whether you're the majority leader or the minority leader, even if you end up in a 50-50 situation. We were there at 50-50 in 2000, and it was uncertain because we hadn't been equally divided in the Senate since something in the 1880s. So Senator Lott, who was the majority leader at the time, and Senator Daschle, who were the Democratic leader at the time, got together and decided to set a precedent for what do you do when you end up in a tie. And it made a lot of sense how they settled it. The vice president breaks the tie.
All right, of course, that's looking ahead to 2021. All right, here's a live look from inside the convention center, the Pennsylvania Convention Center. This is where it's all going on as the ballot counting continues here. Workers there off in the distance at those tables, sorting through and counting those ballots. And in the foreground, you see photographers there taking pictures to document this bit of history that's going on right here in Philadelphia. All right, let's take a look outside the convention center, because that's where the crowd has been growing. Yesterday, we saw a really strong, a loud crowd, but peaceful, as we have both sides represented here. Many Trump supporters came. They want the counting to stop, as we know. Did we lose that shot? Yeah, we did. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
Good to be with you, Vince and Tracy.
You as well.
Yeah, we saw really on both sides outside the convention center. It continues now. It was sort of a dance party for those who are supporting Vice President Biden's side, and Trump supporters carrying signs and calling for the count to stop. There we have the shot back. This is sort of the epicenter where this is all happening. This is where we are going to find out which way this race turns out for the state of Pennsylvania, which right now is very razor thin, but with Mr. Biden now in the lead as of what, about 9 o'clock this morning, guys?
Yeah, and as we continue to take a live look at this picture, we can tell you we are awaiting an update on something that happened near the convention center. Police arrested 2 men late last night after getting a tip that they were making threats against the Pennsylvania Convention Center, where, as you know, inside the city's mail-in ballots are still being counted.
All right. So, yeah, there's great things happening out there. It's really a testament to our democracy, really, when we see what's happening out there. And we're taking a look inside the convention center right now. That's where that press conference happened earlier that we told you about at the top of our newscast here. And any new updates, we will bring it right to you. But joining us now is the president of the New Jersey Senate, Steve Sweeney. All eyes are on Pennsylvania, but of course, across the river, they're looking at Pennsylvania as well. Steve, what a few days it's been watching these results come in. Senate President, how has it been for you the past few days?
Oh, my God. You know, when I saw the numbers in Pennsylvania on election night, I was sick. You know, I mean, to see that large, it just didn't seem like I was in the same community. You know, I'm right across the river. And, you know, it was like, how could Joe Biden be behind here? You know, Joe Biden, like for us in New Jersey, we always considered him our third U.S. senator. You know, I'm sure Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, you guys felt the same way because he was always here for us. So, yeah, when I saw the results election night, I even just the other day when I saw it, it was like 165,000 votes. I'm like, I can't believe we're not going to pull it off. But thank God Pennsylvania, Philadelphia came through strong.
Now, we've been talking a lot about waiting for the results of the presidential race, but we only recently got some results in New Jersey, too, the congressional race there where Jeff Van Drew won re-election. Is there anything you'd like to say to the Van Drew or Kennedy campaigns?
Hey, look, I was rooting for Amy Kennedy. It was a tough, hard-fought election. You congratulate the victor. That's what you do when someone wins. I want to congratulate Jeff. But Amy ran a hell of a campaign and just came up short this time.
And when you look at the state itself, it's overwhelmingly has gone Democratic. And when you look at a tough race like that in an area where, you know, Jeff Van Drew jumped from the Democratic side to the Republican side, you know, how do you look to the future? How do you look for 2 years from now and where the makeup is in Congress?
Well, you know, 2 years from now, obviously, is a lifetime with Congress. With the president, with an incumbent Democrat president, you know, we normally lose seats in the House, you know, in the midterms. It's pretty much Trump, same thing. Trump lost Congress in the midterm. So I would think Jeff's probably in a pretty strong spot, you know, going forward.
Now, there's something that has been watched by a lot of people in our region and really all across the country. The ballot question that was on marijuana legalization for recreational marijuana, it passed. A lot of people are interested in what's going to happen there. So what's going to happen next with that?
Well, we're working right now to get the enabling legislation so we can get going. We want to move quickly. We have a tentative date of November 16th to pass a bill, so that we're creating a marijuana commission based off the Casino Control Commission so that we can get this industry up and running as quickly as possible.
And when you say that November 16th is your target date, do you see any trouble running into getting that passed?
Well, there's always trouble I never say never until it's finished. That's because it's just the nature of it. Someone says, what about this? What about that? And you know, we had a very good agreement earlier, but we're tweaking the bill right now because we saw some things that we thought made more sense to adjust now, and then hand it over to the commission and let them run this industry.
What are some of those things?
Well, it's just how much like we had a cap on how much you could grow. Well, we got to take the cap off, because if we limit the amount you can grow, it's going to starve the medical side of marijuana. It's going to starve it, because there's not going to be enough marijuana to go around. So for us, that's like one of the things we're looking at, is like we have to let the industry grow itself and have everything that goes with it. We in New Jersey looked at marijuana because we're going to have a lower tax rate than Pennsylvania. We'll have a lower tax rate than New York. We're anticipating 43,000 direct jobs in the marijuana industry, because, there's more than just, there's the scientists that are involved in analyzing the strands and creating the different strands, pollinating and creating the different strands. So there's a lot of jobs involved in this, and that's one of the main reasons for me, is that we're going to create a whole new industry here.
And I think it's important to note that the fact that the law is not in effect right now, people should know that if they possess marijuana at this moment, they can still be arrested for it, correct?
Correct, but we're working on, and hopefully we'll have passed into law on the 16th of November, a decriminalization bill. Because we don't want to put people in jail for small amounts of marijuana. We don't want to ruin people's lives, and because they have a criminal record for small amounts of marijuana. So part of this is, now that the ballot question is passed, is to get that decriminalization bill done as quickly as possible. We had held off on it because we didn't want to confuse the issue. But now that it's passed, we want to move quickly.
That makes sense. Thank you. And as a New Jerseyan, what would you like to see from the next presidential administration? What does New Jersey need?
Well, New Jersey needs infrastructure. We need the Gateway Tunnel. We desperately need infrastructure. But what I'm hoping for is what I know we'll get from Joe Biden, which is he'll sit down with Republicans, because this country is horribly divided. And I just saw former Governor Kasich say this the other night, and I couldn't agree with him more. We have to listen to the other side and see how we can come together. Just because you're in charge doesn't mean you just steamroll things. All that does is makes it harder and more difficult. And Joe Biden served with a lot of the Republicans that are in the U.S. Senate right now. So what I'm hoping is that he's going to be able to build a bridge, and we put the people of this country first rather than the individual. This was all about Donald Trump, not about anything else. And I hopefully Joe Biden is going to restore the confidence in the world back into the United States, because all of our friends we're fighting with, and that's not good.
I hope for working together, no matter who is in charge for the next presidential administration. Steve Sweeney, the president of the New Jersey Senate, a Democrat, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Tracy?
All right, let's update. You are waiting on a couple of things. We're waiting on updated numbers from Philadelphia, the updated results of 2,000 to 3,000 votes, and we're also waiting for an update on the arrests of 2 men after threats made against the Pennsylvania Convention Center. So as we wait for those, let's get you updated with NBC10's Lauren Make. She is watching the status of the mail-in ballots, and I know that you've been getting a lot more information about the different buckets of ballots and when and if they'll be counted.
Yeah, Tracy, I want to give you sort of a statewide view. We were focusing last time I saw you on Philadelphia specifically, but I want to give you an idea of sort of what's happening statewide. First of all, setting the stage for you where things stand between Joe Biden and President Trump. Things remain at this moment about 13,000 votes between them. So then you want to know, okay, where are those mail-in ballots and what is left to be counted? So let's take a look at what the Secretary of State's office in Pennsylvania is telling us about that. 112,796 mail-in ballots left to be counted across the state. So that is what they are telling us right now. Things are different in different counties. Let me give you an example. In Allegheny County, they've got 36,456, but they're not all the same. There is a grouping of them, a smaller grouping of them that they've been going through today and giving us results for. Then there is another group that represent ballots where people, there was a situation where people were sent out the wrong ballot. And so when they corrected that, those ballots were kept separate and they could not deal with them until 5 o'clock today, though that represents about 30,000 of these. So we will not be getting results from those 30,000 until after 5 o'clock today. So when you see those numbers, it's not all the same. I'll show you that. Let's take a look at some of the counties in our area. Delaware County, a little more than 3,000 mail-in ballots to deal with. We don't know what the breakdown of those are. I actually asked this morning. We're waiting for information on sort of how that is broken down. And in Bucks County, a little more than 4,000. So that is sort of where things stand. And again, inside those numbers, things can be different in terms of when they can handle those ballots, how they have to handle those ballots, and what we know about what it will take to actually get results. But that's sort of where things stand, guys, on a statewide level.
So back to Allegheny County, because that now is the largest share of votes in the state that are outstanding. Yesterday, I think a lot of people were a little distressed to hear that the county commissioners took an administrative day. But maybe we have more insight now that because of some of these things that you're talking about, that's all the ballots are not the same. It's not the same as if they were just saying, hey, we're not going to count these votes right now.
They could not deal with them yesterday. There was a court ruling that they cannot deal with them until 5 o'clock on Friday. Now, remember, 5 o'clock is also the deadline to get those extra ballots, those late ballots in. So we want to take you now to the press conference involving Philadelphia police. Let's take it right there and listen to what they have to say.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm joined here today with members of my executive team, along with District Attorney Larry Krasner, to give an update on the arrest of 2 individuals outside of the convention center late last night. Please keep in mind that this is an active and ongoing investigation where we will be limited in the amount of information that can be released. First, I'd like to give an overview of the information that we received that brought us to where we are now. On November 5th, 2020, the FBI in Norfolk, Virginia received a tip stating that individuals were en route from Virginia Beach to Philadelphia in a silver Hummer truck and were in possession of weapons and ammunition. Last night at 10:20 p.m., Philadelphia police officers spotted a silver Hummer with Virginia tags parked unattended at 230 North 13th Street and broadcast this information over police radio. At 10:27 p.m., 2 Philadelphia police officers, bicycle patrol officers, observed subject number 1, who was later identified as a 61-year-old at 1230 Arch Street, 1230 Arch Street, carrying a Beretta 9mm pistol in plain view and a holster on his hip, in the company of subject number 2, who was a 42-year-old male, who appeared to have a handgun concealed under his jacket. The 61-year-old, a Pacific Islander male, stated that he did not have a handgun permit and was placed under arrest. The 42-year-old, a white male, stated that he had a Beretta .40 caliber pistol under his jacket and a Virginia concealed carry permit. The state of Pennsylvania does not recognize handgun permits issued by Virginia, so he was also taken into custody. The male stated that they came to Philadelphia in the silver Hummer, parked up the street, and gave written consent to search the vehicle. In that vehicle, an AR-style rifle was recovered from the vehicle. This investigation is ongoing between the Philadelphia Police Department, the DA's office, in close conjunction with the FBI. I'd also like to add that both men reside in Chesapeake, Virginia. I will now turn this over to DA Krasner so he can give an update on their charges.
Thank you, Commissioner. As a result of the arrest made by Philadelphia police with the assistance of our federal law enforcement partners, my office is currently reviewing the evidence and determining what charges to bring. And while we have not finalized our decisions in that regard, because we are still obtaining evidence as I speak here, those charges definitely will include charges of illegal possession of firearms in Philadelphia, specifically Section 6106 and 6108, which are known as VUFA, or violations of the Uniform Firearms Act charges. It is likely there will be some other related charges, possibly possession of an instrument of crime, possibly prohibited offensive weapon, possibly a criminal offense under the election code. But as I said, some of those charges we have not finalized and will be finalizing, at least for now, before the time for the actual preliminary arraignment. That preliminary arraignment is likely to happen either late tonight or early in the morning tomorrow, just given the queue of other cases that remain before their case will be brought up for a preliminary arraignment. As the commissioner noted, we are dealing with a 42-year-old man and a 61-year-old man. Those two men will be identified at the time of charging, and at that time, spellings of their names can be provided as well. As the commissioner indicated, this is an ongoing investigation. It is very active as we speak. And so, on behalf of the DA's office, I can tell you I'm being circumspect about what it is I'm willing to discuss at this time. It is our understanding that when these men were seen on the street in the area of 13th and Arch approximately, that it was observable that they were both in possession of handguns. The AR-style weapon was inside the vehicle, and they were not next to the vehicle. The vehicle itself was somewhat removed from where they were. A third individual, a woman, who appears to have been traveling with the pair, was not arrested. I can tell you also that the AR-style weapon had no serial number, that there was ammunition, both in the vehicle and in the weapons. The District Attorney's Office Election Task Force, along with the DAO Gun Crime Strategies and Prevention Collaborative, are continuing to work successfully and in a collaborative way with the Philadelphia Police Department and the FBI. There has also been assistance provided by representatives of the United States Attorney's Office in this matter at this time. And we intend to continue to work in the same kind of collaborative fashion. Now, let me say this. At this time, we do not have indications that the story is bigger than these two individuals. We do not have indications of that nature at this time. And I think it is important to recognize that the election task force at the DA's office and the election efforts of the Philadelphia Police Department were very successful on Election Day in preventing intimidation, coercion, suppression of voting in Philadelphia. I think it is also worth noting that yesterday there was no significant presence, at least to the best of my organization's knowledge and close collaboration with others, there was no significant presence of hate groups, of white supremacists, of neo-Nazis. That is not something that was observed out there. And the interaction that I saw between supporters of one candidate and supporters of the other candidate, or supporters of continuing to count the votes and supporters of stopping a count of the votes, while it was vocal, did not appear to be violent. So I would caution all of you, and I would ask that all of you be cautious in how you report on a situation that may turn out to be nothing more than two people deciding to come to Philadelphia at a particular time for a somewhat unknown purpose. Obviously, we take this very seriously, but we do not think exaggerating what we know is constructive, and we would ask you also to be cautious in that regard. That's all I have. I can tell you this: there are several offenses that are not traditionally used in criminal court because elections don't happen every day, and also because most elections don't get this heated. But there are several different criminal offenses, both felony and misdemeanor, that exist under the Pennsylvania Election Code. We are looking closely at them in light of the evidence that we have at this time and determining whether or not there are one or more that we would charge at this time. There is nothing stopping us, should we obtain information later, from charging them later or charging additional ones later. But in trying to be transparent with you about the charges we are considering, there's no question we're bringing weapons offenses in light of the illegal possession on the street in Philadelphia of guns as to which the possessors did not have a legal permit to carry. There is a question, and there is the possibility, that we may also bring a criminal charge or more, one or more, under the election code, and I won't comment further on that point.
What's the relationship of the three divisions?
I think it's probably fair to say it seems to be a friendly relationship.
Did the tipster report that the men had any plan for mass violence, or it was they coming to the city with guns?
I have no comment on whether there was a tipster or what that tipster may have said.
How much longer than these three people, can we assume they were not part of the extremist group?
We are, may I answer his question first, please? So, can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Were they part of
I can tell you that we are, at this point, very much in the process of gathering information. As I stand here right now, I don't have information to indicate that any of them are known members of an extremist group. I am not willing to answer that at this time in light of the condition of the investigation itself, which is very much ongoing.
Do you plan on investigating credible allegations of signature verification fraud here in Philadelphia County going on due to a lack of bipartisan review of absentee signatures?
That was a long series of words stuck together. And let me just tell you this, we investigate all credible allegations. Is there another question? Let me answer that if I may. My understanding is that approximately 160 rounds, and I don't know if that includes everything, but approximately 160 rounds were found.
Were there any QAnon stickers on the vehicle?
I have heard information, and I think I've seen photographs that indicate some form of QAnon designation. I've heard stickers. I've also seen, I think in one newspaper report, the claim that there was a hat inside the vehicle that was visible through the windows that had QAnon on it.
Do you think that it is open to the possibility of fraud?
Excuse me, sir. The information I have is that one of them stated that he was licensed in Virginia to carry. The other one stated he did not have a license. And as far as I know, one of them definitely did have a license in Virginia, but that is not sufficient in Pennsylvania.
Do you believe that there is open allegations of voter fraud here in Philadelphia County?
Sir, what was your question? No, not necessarily. One of the obstacles that we face generally with what's happening with our lack of adequate regulation of guns is we increasingly are seeing the phenomenon of ghost guns. These are sometimes, but not always, made of polymer or plastic materials and often come with no serial number at all. There are very serious gaps in the law in many states and federally that don't require a serial number to be on these ghost guns. I didn't say 3D printed gun. What I said to you, sir, was that we are seeing a significant number of guns that have no serial numbers and that can do that legally because of gaps in the law. I don't want to say more than I know. I've heard strong suggestions that this AR may have been a combination of parts from different places, which is common with ghost guns, but I don't want to say more than I know.
All right, folks, okay, taking more questions. I'm taking more questions at this time. I'm taking more questions.
All right, thank you all.
All right, we've been listening to both the police commissioner and the Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. They're updating us on the status of two men who've been arrested from Virginia. Tracy and Vince, this story started breaking last night, just around news time. We knew that a vehicle was spotted outside the environs of the convention center, but there was no one in the vehicle. And we've watched this kind of unfold today. And as you heard the district attorney say, we don't have indications this story is any bigger. They didn't really elaborate, if you'll notice, on the nature of the tip that they got. The police commissioner saying they got a tip from the FBI. The FBI had gotten a tip that there were two men headed to Philly.
But there was no further, she didn't finish it. She didn't say that there was any specific threat.
Correct. But think about the environs where this vehicle was and where they were apprehended near the convention center. And we'll watch this develop because, as you also heard the district attorney say, further charges could be coming, which could include criminal charges under the election code. So if they connect the dots, whether this was connected to the election and perhaps threats related to what's going on with our count here in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania.
He also made the statement, we do not have any indication that this is bigger than these two people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So we'll continue to watch that story. It's going to continue to develop, but we do know that these two men are at least facing some weapons charges for what they were found with, in addition to that ammo that was found.
Right. Vince?
Thank you, guys. Let's take another look at the latest update from the nationwide electoral map. Joe Biden is still in the lead with 253 electoral votes to President Trump's 214. The Democratic former vice president is now just 17 votes away from clinching victory and the White House. As you may know, you should know by now probably, that Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes. And we know that NBC News is telling us that Joe Biden is going to speak tonight in prime time down in Wilmington. We know that Tim Furlong is there. We have an entire crew there. So we will bring that to you and have updates this afternoon as it's coming in. Here's a live look of what's going on inside the convention center. Those are the ballot counting. We know that we're going to get another update this afternoon with about 2,000 to 3,000 ballots. And then after that, there are a series of ballots that are provisional, some that need to be double checked, and military ballots, which will be received up until next Tuesday. Now let's go to Craig Green. He's a constitutional law scholar happening at Temple University. And Craig is going to talk to us today about helping us understand what may be happening next in the next phase of this election. Craig, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm going to put you a bit on the spot because we have some breaking news, and I'm going to just read it off my phone here. From our White House team, President Trump's campaign has tasked David Bossie. He was Trump's deputy campaign manager in 2016 to lead the efforts in challenging election results in several states from Arizona, Pennsylvania, according to a person familiar with the decision. Do you happen to know who he is and what his background is and what we may be expecting? We know that the Trump administration has been looking for someone who, is a James Baker type. For those who don't remember or know who James Baker is, he was involved in the 2000 election fight between Al Gore and George W. Bush.
No, I don't know Mr. Bossie at all well, beyond what you already have said. But it isn't the first person they've tried to find to play this James Baker role and try to unsettle the election counts that are going on across the country in a number of swing states. The main problem is that whether you can find a James Baker or you can't, the real deficit at the moment is evidence and legal argument. And Republicans as prominent as Chris Christie, Rick Santorum, and others have stood up and said that to make allegations, inflammatory allegations, without any evidence or information is a really troubling development. So I think we'll have to see whether this new personality and this new expertise brings anything more to the table than what has been shown so far.
As we went on the air at 2 o'clock today, there were at least 7 lawsuits filed by the Trump administration or the GOP. That number could have gone up since we've been talking. A federal court challenge was settled to allow more poll watchers to be closer inside the Pennsylvania Convention Center there. The DNC told NBC News last night that they were sending lawyers to Harrisburg today to preemptively put forth get their ducks in a row in case there is some sort of challenge there from the state house level. What is the legal strategy here for the Trump administration?
Sure. It's not so different from at the end of a basketball game when you foul to sort of extend the clock, or perhaps try an onside kick in football. these are, at least to all appearances at present, these are relatively desperate measures, efforts to distract attention from the other really important work that's happening right now that, of course, your channel and other channels are reporting on, which is counting the votes. And that's the really key ingredient here, is as long as the votes continue to be counted, the lawyers will stay as a sideshow. The only time that people really need to start being concerned, I think, about legal challenges and lawyers is if there ever is a time when the courts stop the votes from being counted. And there is not any reason that I have seen in any of the news reports over the last week to see that that sort of thing would happen at all. All of the lawsuits that I have in mind in Pennsylvania and all the ones that have been filed in other places, I think fall in this category of almost a distraction, an effort to draw attention away from unfavorable, quite frankly, vote totals accruing in swing states.
You know what, I think it's important to note, this has happened before, presidential elections and local elections and statewide elections as well. There are legal challenges. They are put forth when the races are close, or if somebody on either side says that, you know, they're not happy with the result, but that's pretty normal. But in this case, you're saying that these cases don't really have much merit. There isn't a lot of evidence to support some of the challenges that they're putting forward.
That's a strong point. I think the thing that feels so different to all of your viewers this time is the mixture and the kinds of ballots that are being used. I mean, what an extraordinary election where there are so many mail-in ballots and on-the-day ballots and ballots that are being sent in, dropped into boxes. This is a very uncommon set of procedures, but behind it is an institutional framework of vote counters, who are the same kind of vote counters we've had in every election, and indeed I suspect we'll continue to have in elections. And those people go out there and work with the kind of integrity, character, and transparency that mark American democracy. Yes, quite true. There are always small challenges in this sort of thing. People may not remember Jill Stein challenged the vote in Wisconsin in 2016. It changed 130 votes. So again, you have a Republican like Scott Walker saying a recount in Wisconsin is not going to change 20,000 votes. And I think as long as the votes continue to be counted, my strong suspicion is that the margins will swallow the errors. That whatever small technical concerns that anyone can raise about the electoral process, hopefully, and I believe, as in previous elections, the margins that will be at stake will be large enough to swallow any errors that can possibly be found. And I have to say again, based on what we've seen so far and the kind of evidence, not the kind of rhetoric that we've heard, I just don't think there's anything extraordinary or irregular or seriously contestable about any large fraction of the current American vote, which is remarkable given how different this vote has felt to the voters who participated and indeed the officials who are responsible for counting the votes.
Yeah, it's amazing that everything has gone so smoothly, especially in the circumstances that we've had in the past several months with the pandemic and such. You know, you kind of hit on this a little bit, but some Trump allies, both politicians and some Trump-friendly media organizations, have suggested that the Pennsylvania legislature, which is under Republican control, should consider choosing their own electors that could favor choosing President Trump if he was not to be declared the winner of the state. You know, is that possible or even legal?
Yeah, I think the thing to say to everyone is everyone in Pennsylvania assumes that the candidate who wins the vote will get to choose the electors and therefore be counted in the election. It is technically arguable that even after all the votes counted up, and they come up, let's imagine they come up for Vice President Biden, that somehow at the last second, the General Assembly of Pennsylvania could all of a sudden strip away the electors and send an entirely different slate than what the people of Pennsylvania voted for. I have to say there is a legal argument for such a thing to happen, but I cannot imagine anyone in Pennsylvania politics taking that proposal seriously. I just can't imagine anyone would stand for it. Frankly, it's a really sad sign about the American state of politics that anyone could even mention it in public, this possibility. Imagine what an election would be for the future when every legislature could just think about snatching the presidential electoral vote away from the people. I just think America wouldn't stand for such a thing.
You know, and there have been some flashbacks for people to the 2000 election between former Vice President Al Gore and President George W. Bush when the vote count in Florida was challenged. Will this wind up in the Supreme Court this time around, the U.S. Supreme Court?
So I worked for Judge Merrick Garland that year, and we watched that election nonstop for a month. And the main thing people forget again is that margin was 500 votes. And that's a rare circumstance where the margin was that small. I have to say, if the U.S. Supreme Court got involved in this election, based on the evidence, again, that is available and that seems to be likely to produce. I think that would be the most remarkable thing, much more profound, dramatic, and provocative than what happened in Bush v. Gore. And Bush v. Gore was plenty controversial at the time. But I think to get involved in this election would be all the more so, not least because, of course, Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans just put the 6th conservative justice on the court only days ago, weeks ago. And so I think this is a situation where the U.S. Supreme Court has no legal reason, no constitutional reason to get involved in the election, and they would be much better off for themselves institutionally, for the Constitution, and for the country if they would sit this one out, which I think is probably what they will do.
Now let's take a look outside of Pennsylvania. There's at least one lawsuit filed in Nevada. Georgia will likely have to have a recount, and we could expect some litigation there. You know, what will this amount to across the nation? And you kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think it's good to kind of hit back on the point of what's happening in other states.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there are some suggestions that Nevada has different issues than some other places. There are going to be recounts. So that's what you mentioned in Georgia. I think that's quite right. The Trump campaign has promised there will be a recount in Wisconsin. With the Georgia vote, which is really very small, it's conceivable that some number of votes would move. But of course, you can't predict which way. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, challenged the election in Wisconsin, and she moved 130 votes in favor of Donald Trump. So I think the recount, the fact is the electoral vote counting processes in a lot of states, maybe every state, are so well managed and so well controlled and so transparent. You're not going to lose or change very many votes, and not in a predictable direction. The question of lawsuits, I think those issues, and especially in Nevada, it doesn't look like the margin there is going to be so close that a lawsuit of any plausible, you have to find a fraction of the vote you can challenge that meets the margin between the candidates. And I just don't see that at the present time. You know, the margin in Nevada, I think, is getting larger by the day, maybe by the hour. And so I think that any sort of legal challenges, in a certain sense, they're already late because the vote counts are continuing to rack up. And at this point, we don't even really have a clear legal theory what it would even be. We have a lot of rhetoric, but actually not a lot of evidence, and actually not even a lot of arguments that would even plausibly produce some kind of scenario like a Bush v. Gore or something much worse in the 2020 election.
Craig Green, it should be an interesting couple of days and weeks as this election stretches on. Constitutional law scholar from Temple University, thank you so much for your time and helping us and our viewers better understand what may be coming down the pike. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.
Tracy?
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Vince. All right, let's get back to NBC10's Lauren Make. We've been talking about numbers. Yesterday, we had 124,000 still to count. Now we're down to 112,000 to count in Pennsylvania. Is that right, Lauren?
Yeah, those are the mail-in ballots you're talking
Yes.
about, Tracy. And those are important because we've got this gap between Joe Biden and President Trump. Of course, Joe Biden now ahead of President Trump, but the state is still considered too close to call. So let's see where we do stand here right now before we take a look specifically at Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. So here's where things stand. About the same here as when I last saw you, about 13,000 votes between the two of them, which means a lot of those votes we probably should be getting updates sometime soon. So let's take a look at where things stand, specifically in Philadelphia. We heard from Philadelphia City Commissioners this morning about where things stand with them. And this is what we learned. We learned that there is a bucket of about 40,000 ballots that they say will be left after they give us the afternoon update today. Now, that update is supposed to be about 2,000 to 3,000, and then they're going to have 40,000 left. And here is what they say will be in that grouping. Those will be ballots that need some sort of review. They will need to be gone through by hand for some reason, can't just be put through the machine. They will be provisional ballots, and we don't know how many of those there are in the city. Those might be because you requested a mail-in ballot, but then you showed up at your polling site and wanted to vote in person, but you didn't bring your ballot with you, so then they had to have you vote provisionally. And then there would be the U.S. military and overseas ballots, and they're putting, this generally at 40,000, but we really don't even know how many of these there will be because they can still come in today, tomorrow, through the weekend, and up through Tuesday at 5 o'clock. There is an extra week for military and overseas ballots to arrive. So that's what we know about what is happening in Philly. Of course, as you just mentioned, Tracy, about 112,000 and some mail-in ballots across the state. Now, there are some things that we still are trying to get answers to, and we are slowly chipping away at those questions that we have. Provisional ballots that I just mentioned, we know that statewide there are about 85,000 at least provisional ballots. Those are in 56 counties, so that's not all the counties in Pennsylvania, and those probably aren't the entire grouping of provisional ballots for each of those counties. That's just what the Secretary of State's office told me this morning. Hey, this is what we know about at this point. So that's provisional ballots. Then there are the post-election day ballots, the ones, remember, that you got an extra 3 days between Election Day and today at 5 o'clock for those ballots to arrive through the U.S. Postal Service. Those are having to be segregated and set aside. There are court challenges regarding those. But we don't know how many of those there are. I asked at the news conference this morning with the city commissioners, and they didn't have an answer for me at that time. So we're still trying to get that number, for example. And then, as we just mentioned, the military and overseas numbers. So we are sort of chipping away at the questions that we have and finding out a little bit more. But there are still questions out there about, where these ballots are going to come from. And then there will be a point where, the folks who make these calls will weigh whether there are enough ballots out there where President Trump could make up the difference.
Right. And that's why they're keeping them separate in case that happens. All right, Lauren, thanks. Appreciate it. Jim?
Okay, joining us now is David Thornburg with the Committee of 70, nonpartisan committee led by business and civic leaders. Thank you for being here, David.
Well, my pleasure.
So before the election, we knew the world would be watching Pennsylvania. It's a battleground state. And watching as these ballots are being counted, especially the mail-in ballots, give us a sense of how you believe that's going.
Well, it was a monumental challenge. It was we've got 10 times more of these than we've ever had in the history of the Commonwealth. All things considered, I think this went pretty well, not only in Philadelphia, but in the surrounding counties and in the rest of Pennsylvania. And, it's worth remembering, for all the drama of the last few years, if we've been able to count these ballots, starting on Election Day and preparing for them before Election Day, this would have been all over by now. We could have called this election, Tuesday or early Wednesday. So the fact that we're still in the midst of this now is the fact that, unfortunately, the legislature and the governor couldn't agree on that critical step. But all things being considered, I think things have gone pretty well.
And just for people who are out there watching, as a reminder, the reason we have this volume of mail-in ballots was because people were concerned that they didn't want to go to the polls because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So we knew that there would be a large number of them, correct? And we also knew it would take a while to count them. So when you hear, but when you hear questions about these ballots supposedly being dropped, after Election Day, those kinds of accusations, is there any merit to that, David?
No. As you pointed out, the ballots that we're counting now might have been voted 3 or 4 weeks ago. My ballot, for instance, which I deposited in first week of November, as far as I can tell from the website, hasn't been counted yet. So there's nothing mysterious. It's just we had a huge backlog. We had 350,000 in Pennsylvania to make our way through, and they've been. And I remember saying to folks like, sit tight. It's going to be Friday morning, Friday afternoon, maybe early Saturday. So they've been actually outperforming what we anticipated at the outset.
What are some of the safeguards that are in place to make sure that everything is just so, that it's on the up and up? Because obviously we've heard complaints, particularly from the Trump campaign, that they aren't being allowed to observe carefully enough, not being allowed to get close enough. But from what you've seen about how this is progressing, what are some of those safeguards to make sure that everything is proceeding as it should?
Sure. Well, it starts with your application for a mail ballot. And if you went through that, which I did as well, it keys off your official PennDOT license, which has a signature on it. So there actually is sort of a voter ID segment built into that process to begin with. Then when you get your ballot, there's only one ballot that you receive that has a unique barcode associated with it. So there's really no ability for people to vote twice by mail. And then there is the declaration page, which you have to sign and fill in your address, name and address on the outside. There's been a lot of attention given to this naked ballot or secrecy envelope issue that requires you to, required you to put your ballot into one envelope, put that into another envelope, and that makes it impossible for the folks counting that to identify the ballot with the individual. It separates them. And then, once it comes to the processing and counting, the law allows for observers from official observers from each party and each campaign. And they've been at the convention center since the start. There's a lot of back and forth about that, and there was an accommodation made to moving their observation closer to the action and increasing the number of observers. So, I just ticked off about a half dozen different safeguards to the process that ultimately I think should give voters a sense of safety and security.
David, it's Tracy. We've been talking with you over the last week or so, more than that. And then just last night, the Committee of 70 put out, I call it a strongly worded statement about all the allegations of fraud and what the president's been saying earlier today. He tweeted, Philadelphia has gotten a rotten history on election integrity. But one line that stands out to me in your statement, never before have we seen a sitting president attack the very foundation of the government and democratic process he swore under oath to defend and protect. Tell me why you put out this statement.
Well, as we said in the statement, and as you folks know, we've been at this business of watching over and safeguarding elections in Philadelphia for 116 years. So we know the territory, and we know that things don't always go well in Philadelphia for a variety of different reasons. But having been deeply involved in the preparation of this election, we're absolutely confident that we took the safeguards, the security measures, and that the city commissioners were following both the spirit and the letter of the law. So to hear that kind of challenge, not from like a Philly ward leader, but from the president of the United States, was astounding. And we felt it necessary to respond to that, because this is an area we know. I don't know about what goes on in Arizona or Georgia or Kentucky or whatever. I'm reasonably confident that they have the same level of professionalism that we do. But we know this territory, and as a Philadelphian and as an institution that takes our mission seriously, we felt.
David Thornburg with the Committee of 70. David, thanks for always being available to help us understand better from your perspective.
Sure enough.
Tracy.
All right, so Pennsylvania remains the biggest electoral prize remaining, right? But there are other states that we're still watching. Let's take a look at those numbers. Let's take a look at Arizona. You see it close. Joe Biden still maintains a slight lead, but the race remains too close to call. 93% reporting of the vote in. President has been chipping away at that throughout the day. Count is very tight in the usual Republican stronghold of Georgia. In fact, at the moment, look at that, 49.4%. It's tied at that. So we know there is going to be a recount. Atlanta mail-in ballots are being counted. Okay, Nevada. This is where Biden has a razor-thin lead. The Trump campaign has filed a lawsuit here, calling for the vote count to be stopped. Nevada has 6 electoral votes up for grabs. Votes from the Las Vegas area still need to be counted there, but you can see 92% reporting so far. All right, you know how Philly is. When something happens here, we are on Twitter, and never more so than this last week. Philly was the top trend this morning as people posted their reactions and memes after Joe Biden took the lead in Philadelphia. Look at this. Springsteen says, that's the name of the of the person's handle. Well, they blew up the Chicken Man in Philly last night. Let's see what else we're saying about really this historic moment. You know, we couldn't do anything. We have to have this. We have to have Jason Kelsey. Don Clark gets the whole state. Philly, Georgia, Detroit at 90% Biden. Black women did this, and they deserve a bigger seat at the table, I think. West Philly reacts to Biden's lead in Pennsylvania by dancing in the street, of course. We are also seeing dancing outside the Pennsylvania Convention Center in Center City. Continue to react, continue to tell us what you think about really this historic moment, and so much of the country's eyes are focused right on us.
The birthplace of democracy is really showing up today in Philadelphia.
I love some of the memes on social media, you know, talking about us, talking about Philadelphia.
I've seen a lot of gritty.
Yeah, a lot of gritty.
And
exactly.
some Game of Thrones, gritty Game of Thrones stuff going around.
Gives us something to smile about because, yeah, it's a stressful time. It's a tense situation, right?
It's so true. And when we saw some people really being kind of harsh about Philly, saying we're going to go to Philly, and then everybody in Philly saying, you don't know us if you're going to throw out those threats. We have gritty, you know?
Right. Yeah, there's a great article in the Philadelphia Inquirer of that roundup. Oh, it was fantastic.
It was very fun. And you're right, Jim. We need a moment of, just like let's laugh about something right now. All right, let's move on. Joining us now is Alonzo Washington with CASA in Action. Alonzo, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So your organization helps in reaching Latino, immigrant, and working class voters. Now that you're looking back on everything that you did, what were some of your challenges before Election Day?
You know, I would like to say thank you to everybody out there who went out to vote in this upcoming election. There were so many hardships placed in our path for Black and brown voters, for Latino, immigrant, and indigenous people to be able to vote in this upcoming election. And we're just so proud that our people came out and showed out in this upcoming election. We've mobilized over 1.2 million voters here at CASA in Action, and this work doesn't stop now. We're going to continue to work after this election as well.
Yeah, and then we had the protests in Philly in the spring, and then more recently, what did that do to your effort to reach out to people?
We continued to knock on doors. We didn't stop. Our folks kept on continuing to knock on doors, reach out to people constantly every day. Black and brown people have mobilized and are winning this election for Joe Biden. But this isn't about him. This is about us and our communities and our people, and then Black and brown women who actually went out and voted and made sure that we won this election in Philly and in Harrisburg as well. So and throughout the state of Pennsylvania. So we have a lot to thank for those Black women and for those Latino women that went out and voted for the Democrats this year.
Yeah, one more piece of the puzzle for your team, doing with all the challenges, plus add in a pandemic. So that had to be a little bit challenging.
That was challenging, you know. Because there was so much misinformation out there from this administration. People were weary, but we went out and knocked on doors and informed our voters and informed Black and brown voters who otherwise wouldn't have went out to the polls, and let them know that there's options out there for them to actually vote, and we weren't going to allow COVID-19 nor this administration ruin our chances for making sure that we remove Trump from office. That was our goal, and we educated all of our voters to make sure they went out to the polls.
Your organization was aligned with our organization in that this whole time we have been fighting misinformation and people's fears because of misinformation. What kinds of things were you hearing from people, and what kinds of issues and information did you have to say this is true and this is not true?
Yeah, you know, it was a lot of things that went out there that folks just felt like it wasn't enough information for them to be able to go to the polls. They weren't sure where their polling places were. They weren't sure where to drop off their ballots. So we educated and informed voters and Black and brown people around the state to make sure they knew where they can actually vote, and they did just that. And so we're so proud of them. We're so proud of our community that they got out and went out and turned out in record numbers. In the state of Pennsylvania, turned out like no other, the most numbers we've ever seen. So we're so proud of everybody for getting up and getting out during this pandemic.
After all that you've done and all the work that you've done, what's going through your mind today as we all sort of keep our eyes on the Pennsylvania Convention Center and the demonstrators on both sides and the volunteers who deserve the applause that the city leaders today were saying thank you for all these volunteers who worked so hard to count them. What's going through your mind?
Look, we want to thank our elections officials. We know some of them are volunteering, others are doing this during a pandemic, but we know that they're there to make sure every vote counts, and they count every vote. So every vote must be counted, and every vote must count. And I'm proud that we have a democracy here in our country to make sure that every vote does count, because that's what's on our minds every day, to make sure that no voter is disenfranchised. And we're not going to allow that to happen, and we're not going to sit idly by. So that's why we're going to continue to fight. It doesn't end today. It doesn't end tomorrow. We're going to continue to fight in Pennsylvania to make sure that every vote does count. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that every vote counts.
Every vote counts. Every voice is heard. Alonzo Washington with CASA in Action. Thank you so much, Alonzo. We appreciate you being with us today.
No, thank you for having me.
Jim?
As hype as you get, Billy. Let's go.
All right, so this is what's going on outside the Pennsylvania Convention Center. Folks on both sides of this in Philadelphia continuing to make their voices heard about this election count peacefully. And this morning, the group was seen here doing the YMCA by the Village People. And some of their sweatshirts count every vote. So they're dancing out there as they await the outcome of the count going on inside. And this is where it's happening right now. This is a live look inside the Pennsylvania Convention Center. This is where they are counting those ballots here in Philadelphia. And we heard the mayor say the system still works. The people have spoken and called baseless the claims of fraud and said our founding fathers would be proud. As workers here have been toiling away to count those mail-in ballots, and we've been hearing the numbers from Lauren Make as she updates us about the progress on that front. Nearly 700,000 of those votes counted in Philly as of midday today, waiting for another update of a couple thousand, 2,000 to 3,000 this afternoon. And it has propelled Joe Biden ahead of President Trump. That was as of earlier this morning. It's still a very close race. So this race in Pennsylvania has not yet been called. There's more counting to be done. And you can watch this. This is a streaming picture that speaks to what officials say is the transparency of this process, despite claims that by the Trump administration that at times their observers weren't allowed to get close enough. And that's been in the courts, as we know. So this is an ongoing process. We are here for you and will be throughout the day as we await the results in Pennsylvania, which, as we know, could decide the outcome of this election with its 20 electoral votes. Tracy? That's a big prize. Let's look at the numbers right now. This is Pennsylvania with 95% of the vote reporting, 49.4 to 49.3%, but there are lots of buckets. That's what we've been calling them, buckets of votes that have been segregated, that have been set aside because of the legal challenges. We'll see what happens with all of the votes being counted right now, see what the results of that are, and then they will look at those segregated buckets, and those will surely be the focus of any legal challenge from Republicans or the Trump campaign.
You know, I think it's important to remind our viewers, if they have forgotten, that Pennsylvania before a couple months ago did not have universal mail-in ballot allowances. You had to prove that you had some sort of challenge to get out to the polls to get a mail-in ballot. And then today, Commissioner Dealey, 337,000 ballots that they they counted and processed inside the Pennsylvania Convention Center. And you look at how many were processed across the state, you know, that's really a feat with no real issues.
Yeah, and this is all tied to the pandemic, as we know, Vince, because there was the concern early on about, you know, would people feel comfortable going to a polling place and casting their ballot? And there was also concerns about, you know, some of those poll workers, would they be safe in a pandemic, having to go maybe into help a voter with the machine or to make sure they understood how to do this. In fact, a neighbor of mine who happens to be in her 80s. She's very dedicated to the process, and she's been a volunteer poll worker for years. But she said, this election, I can't be there. I can't do that. It's not safe for me. So that was the reason why we then went, obviously, to this mail-in ballot, and the rules were changed, as you said.
Yeah, and there was the big push to get younger poll workers, to get people involved, right? So when you think about everything that had to happen to get people to the point of voting, to get them to Tuesday, it was a monumental task.
And you know, I had a lot of friends, I'm 35, I had a lot of friends who volunteered, put their hand up and said, I want to go out there, I want to be part of this civic process. People who took off from work just so that they can, go and help and make sure that everybody's vote is counted.
We're not all putting our ages out there.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Nope.
No.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Vince, you
all right.
feel free.
Joining us now is Kimberly Mutcherson. Kimberly, you run a law school, and you're certainly familiar with our nation's laws. What's your sense of the claims that you're hearing right now about the issues with the vote count? And does the Trump side have a good case? Is it still early to say this?
I don't think it's too early to say this. I mean, my sense is that what we're seeing is, one, the implementation of a plan that this administration was setting the stage for long before we came to this day. And two, that the lawsuits that we're seeing filed are a real sign of desperation. And the judges are being responsive to that, right? They're saying, you're not bringing us any evidence. And these are not just democratically appointed judges. These are judges who were appointed by Republican presidents. And they're saying, there's nothing here, right? There's nothing that we're seeing that tells us that there's a problem with the count, that there's a problem with the ballots. And so we're going to proceed as we should.
And, I think that's important to point out, as you just mentioned, that these are judges appointed by both Republicans and Democrats who are saying, show me the evidence, show us the evidence. It's not there.
Right.
So is it too early to say that the Supreme Court and newly appointed Justice Amy Coney Barrett, that they could help him in winning? What's your take on that?
I think that because of what we're seeing in the lower courts, that is a sign that we might not even ever make it up to the Supreme Court. I mean, there are some questions about, again, where we might see Amy Coney Barrett going, and that we have a conservative majority on the court now. But I would like to think that the justices on the Supreme Court at their core believe in our system and believe that people should be able to cast their votes, and that validly cast votes should be counted. And that's what we see happening right now.
I've heard a lot of legal scholars talk about this over the past couple days leading into the election, and over the past couple nights where I haven't been sleeping and watching a lot of MSNBC, but saying that the Supreme Court really does not want to weigh in, does not want to get into these cases like they did in 2000. So, how do you agree with that? Do you think that is necessarily going to be the case?
I do agree with that. I mean, I think that, a lot of us can look back on Bush v. Gore, and there are concerns about, one, the legitimacy of the court that comes from the Supreme Court deciding a presidential election based on, arguments about the votes and the count and all of that good stuff. And so I do think that, that this court, and particularly Chief Justice Roberts, cares a lot about the legitimacy of the court. And if they can stay out of this, I think they would love to stay out of this.
Now, let's talk about the other side. Joe Biden has not come out against packing the court, which, for those of viewers that may not understand, it would mean increasing the number of members of the Supreme Court, and then also putting as many judges as possible on the federal circuit courts. But he said that he would appoint scholars to review our nation's courts and give him a recommendation for reform on those. Is there anything that you would recommend?
Well, one, I mean, if we look at the number of justices on the court now, it is the number that corresponds to what was the number of federal circuits at one time, which was 9. And now we're up to 13 circuits. So there's an argument certainly that you could make that if we want to have a number of Supreme Court justices that represents the number of circuits around the country, that would be a reason to actually add some justices to the court. I mean, we know how important our judiciary is, and one of the ways that we know how important it is the amount of effort that has gone into the 4 years of the Trump presidency to get more judges appointed. I mean, hundreds of judges that have been appointed by this president over the last 4 years. Courts matter, and courts are important, and we want our courts to be representative of the country. And so one of the things that requires is, taking time to see who's on the bench, who's been appointed, who's been elected, and to really think about whether our justice system is diverse enough to actually mete out justice in a country that is as diverse as ours is.
And, New Jersey voters legalized or said that they wish to see recreational marijuana legalized this election day. And now there's a lot of talk about expungements for people who have previously been charged with possession. How far along is that process? We heard from New Jersey State Senate President Steve Sweeney, who says that they're hoping to pass some legislation to decriminalize it in November. But what more needs to happen? And do you think that what the legislators are putting forward go far enough?
Yeah, so I think, right. So as a starting point, you need to have that legislation that really implements the decision that New Jersey voters made. And I happen to be one of those voters, and I'm proud of what folks did in this state on Election Day. But then you also have to have an entire system in place to figure out how you're going to regulate that system. And it was done, obviously, within the context of creating the dispensaries for medical marijuana. Some of that can carry over, but potentially not all of it will carry over. So there are a lot of layers of figuring out who gets a license, where do you get to set up, all of those kinds of things are going to be important. And so that's a process that will and should take time. And, I am certainly not the only one who believes very firmly, and I think Governor Murphy believes this too, that a piece of this type of reform has to be expungements, that there are so many people whose lives have been really deeply and negatively impacted as a consequence of laws that made marijuana possession criminal, who deserve at this point to have their records expunged so that they can go on with their lives.
And we've seen a wave of black women making history lately. New Jersey recently put a black woman on the state Supreme Court, and the nation could potentially see Kamala Harris as vice president. How are you feeling about that?
Couldn't be more excited. The new New Jersey Supreme Court Justice, Fabiana Pierre-Louis, happens to be a Rutgers Law alum. She was one of my students when she was in law school, and she's a wonderful person. And so it's amazing to see that happen. It's devastating that these kinds of firsts have taken so long, frankly. The first black woman to be admitted to practice in the United States was admitted, Charlotte Ray was admitted in 1872. And we've still got so far to go and so many firsts that are still happening. But, I think about my children. My son is 15, my daughter is 12. The first president that they'll remember is Barack Obama. And then potentially the vice president that they're going to remember really well is going to be Kamala Harris. And I think that's the kind of thing that really helps young black and brown children and young girls really think about, what is my future? What can I achieve in this country? What's available to me in this country? And that's something that I am not cynical about at all. I think it's tremendous. I think it is a mark of progress, but it certainly doesn't tell us that we've gotten everywhere where we need to go.
Well, I'm looking forward to a more diverse future as well. Kimberly Mutcherson, the first black female dean of Rutgers University Law. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Tracy?
And we want to thank you for joining us here on NBC10. And we are getting ready to go on air at 4 o'clock. We're waiting for new numbers. Lauren Make is getting new information about different buckets, different legal challenges. We have a whole team of reporters and photographers getting ready to bring you the very latest coming up on NBC10 News at 4. And we'll continue to update right here on NBC10.com. Thanks.